because some people may get really disheartened by not seeing these results within 10 days. That may negatively contribute to their feelings of worth, their feelings of self, and maybe even their mental health as well. I think we've nailed it here. And by that I mean I think we've nailed the potential structure. So riddle me this. So I upload videos twice a week. One thing is maybe like an original content video on a Monday. Something like a continuation of the TFNL growth guide, like the last video, which I will note, I really appreciate your support on that video. It seems like a lot of people found it really helpful, and I really enjoyed doing it. So that could definitely become a series if you want to see it. Or on the Monday, like a different original video idea. And then Thursday, a bit more of a reaction commentary based video. So kind of Monday original, Thursday reaction commentary. That's what I'm tickling thus far. So we're getting a good balance of both, a 50-50 split. I'm feeling a bit nasally, as you can probably tell. As you can tell from the title, it's a Lilly Sabri video today, which again, Lilly has popped up a few times. I haven't covered her for a while, and she is back once again with the Renegade Master, and we're going to tickle top 10 sexy summer shoulder exercises, 10-day results, 5-minute workout. But before we do so, you know what must be done, and that is, if you like the video at any point, please let me know you like the video by liking the video. 1,300 likes in the first 24 hours is the goal, so if we've reached that, that'd be bloody splendid. I would very much appreciate it. If you haven't already, please do consider clicking the red button down below to subscribe to the channel, and maybe even the bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. And if you have a question you want me to answer at the end of the next video, please don't forget to drop it down below in the comment section for comment question of the week, and I shall do so. I believe this hat is also very similar to the hat I first wore when I first covered Lilly Sabri. I feel like it's slightly off to the side like so. It's a bit like Lizzie McGuire-esque, that kind of era of fashion. I like it. Wouldn't wear it to the gym, but I'll wear it right now. I have made my comments about the extent of Lilly's clickbait before, with unrealistic expectations with promise, often surrounding like spot reduction of fat. In fairness to Lilly, this is probably one of her most legit titles I've seen thus far, which I respect. 10-day results is an interesting one because, again, am I saying you're not going to see results after 10 days? Absolutely not. I'm just saying I think putting that deadline of saying you will see results in 10 days, it does or can lead to a lot of unrealistic expectations, and if people don't see results after 10 days, it can often lead to people feeling like they are the problem, they've done something wrong. They can often feel very, very disheartened, which may lead them to no longer wanting to pursue their fitness journey. I'm not saying it will, I'm saying that's definitely a consideration, which is why I'm not a really big fan of saying you will see results within a certain time frame.
No equipment needed for this, but if you want to make it harder, you can grab some light weights. Alright guys, let's do this.
The dumbbell shoulder press as a whole is a fantastic movement, like a really good movement. I think, to be honest, it would probably be my favourite shoulder movement myself. So that's just fantastic. Obviously, in an ideal world, we would sit down. I know we aren't able to at home, but I'm just saying, in an ideal world, you sit down because it then eliminates certain variables and factors which could prevent you from taking your shoulders to close proximity of failure. So, for example, your core may get a bit hairy here and give out, whereas if you were seated, that wouldn't be a consideration. But we're removing that because we're at home, so we may not have access to a seat. The big thing is that range of motion, so making sure we're going the whole way down. We want to fully lengthen the shoulders, specifically here the anterior delt, which is obviously the front muscle of the shoulders here. So we want to make sure we're going all the way down, so we're getting a good full stretch, and then coming her way up as she is and converging, so coming across the body and meeting at the centre point, which Lilly is fantastic. There's also real no need to go double to single. I'd probably just stick with double personally. The other thing is elbow angle, so pressing in the scapular plane would be preferred, and by that I mean pressing with your elbows about 30 to 45 degrees in front of you, rather than out here. You're kind of in here, so I can only really go to that low comfortably. If I go to the scapular plane, for example, I can come all the way down. I'm not saying I will, but I can further lengthen the anterior delt. The anterior delt obviously runs like this. Why would you want to press out? You'd want to press in the direction that the muscle's running, essentially. Also want to know that Lilly did say that this video requires no equipment. I mean, arguably, yes, you could do these movements without equipment, absolutely. Depending on your kind of journey into fitness, let's say you're very new to fitness and you're starting out, I think it could be great starting with no weight. But obviously, we want to try and do a little bit more each time. So maybe you could start with like the no weight for the first day, then maybe a kilo the next day, then maybe 2 kilos the next day, and just kind of bumping out that progressive overload. So just do a little bit more every session if you're able to, or as often as you are able to. If you were going to do 1.5 rep movements, I personally would make sure that extra half is not the top half, but the bottom half. The dumbbell shoulder press very much works the anterior delts in their lengthened position, and that lengthened position is that bottom position. And muscles, when looking at hypertrophy, so the building of muscle, do typically tend to respond better to being worked in the lengthened position versus the shortened position. Obviously, we want to do both, but I'm just stating they typically do tend to respond better to the lengthened position. So it makes sense when doing a lengthened position dominant movement to then get, if you are going to do 1.5 reps, that extra half rep in that lengthened position. So like I said, rather than the top half, the bottom half instead. So with this personally, I feel like I would choose one or the other. I would either do a front raise or I would do a side raise. And again, this is a movement that I feel like would very much burn. You're holding that anterior delt there under tension for a long time, therefore it's going to burn whilst working the other delt in a lateral raise motion. Doesn't look as fun, I'm going to be honest with you, doesn't look as kind of jazzy and quite as like Instagrammable and social media-able. Yes, we'll go with that. But I do believe just doing one or the other is probably going to be more effective when looking at like a shoulder workout. But again, it does get a bit boring, so I do understand why Lilly has included this. The other thing is when doing that side raise here, the same rules as before apply. Making sure you're side raising, so that lateral raise in the scapular plane. So remember that 30 to 45 degree in front of you. So rather than out here, we're here. I'm actually going to put a video on screen now of Ryan Dewars probably doing a side raise. I didn't manage to get footage of this myself. I should have done this, my bad. You'll see there's a slight forward lean. He's side raising with his arms really straight, almost like he's trying to touch the walls beside him, and he is raising in that scapular plane. So like I said, 30 to 45 degrees in front of him. Because a side delt does better align at an angle rather than being out to the side, it does better align with movement in the scapular plane. So you want to make sure you're getting the most out of these movements, you know, most bang for your buck sort of thing. So we're doing a punching based movement here. Again, this is very anterior delt heavy, obviously minus the side raise earlier. A lot of these movements are very anterior delt heavy, which obviously anterior refers to the front. I'm not saying it's a problem, I'm saying your anterior delt gets so heavily worked through any kind of pressing movement, so be that horizontal for the chest or vertical for the shoulders, and any kind of front raise movements, and in terms of any chest movement as a whole. Throughout your weekly workouts and whatnot, you are probably getting a lot of anterior delt involvement and recruitment. Therefore, I would probably place a bit more emphasis on the side of the delts, maybe even the posterior delts, which obviously the rear delts, which we'll get to shortly. But with the punching kind of thing, again, because you're under tension for a fair amount of time and there's a lot of kind of movement there, it will very much burn. It will very much feel like it's working very effectively, but I feel like it's not a movement I would necessarily include myself. And at the end of this video, I will kind of go through my maybe top 3 movements for the shoulders, which I think most of your shoulder work should prioritize and surround, we'll say. So we've got bicep curl to an Arnold press. Oh, okay, so it's got an external rotation. So the thing is, a lot of people do that external rotation movement to work the rotator cuff. I say it's kind of problematic. It's obviously rotator cuff does this in a lot of cases. When you're doing that with this weight in hand, where is gravity taking it? Or where is resistance taking it, I'll say? Because obviously it's a free weight movement, the resistance is taking it down to the floor because obviously gravity, but you want to be taking it away from you. Although I probably wouldn't do movements like this myself personally, if you are going to do them, I'd ensure you either have like a band or a cable machine in which the resistance is traveling in the direction you want it to, not rather than straight to the floor, because obviously we want across, not down. And then obviously the bicep curl is what it is. I would also ensure that you're going all the way down and fully lengthening that bicep out, so straighten that arm and curl up. But then you've got the Arnold press, and the Arnold press is here where you kind of rotate round into a shoulder press. So we go round like so. The range of motion, much better because she's starting from down here, thus in that fully lengthened position on the anterior delt, fantastic. Then she's rotating round and converging. Cool, we like that, conversion coming across. But with the Arnold press, I've mentioned this before, is essentially, it doesn't actually work the anterior delt in any other manner to a normal shoulder press. So whether you Arnold press or just do a normal shoulder press, the anterior delt is going through the same range of motion. The only thing that changes is actually the load used. So you're likely going to use a lot less load when doing an Arnold press versus a regular anterior delt shoulder press. Therefore, it would make sense to then choose the anterior delt shoulder press instead of the Arnold press, because essentially you're choosing a suboptimal variation, or a variation that doesn't change how the muscle is working but does limit how much load you can use. If you are going to do variations that might limit how much load is being used, you typically want those variations to also change how the muscle is working. It's like when you see people do like a landmine RDL versus a regular RDL. It's not changing what muscles are working and how they're working. What it is changing is how much load you can use, thus worsening the effectiveness of that movement by choosing an inferior variation, like I would say the Arnold press is when compared to the standard dumbbell shoulder press. This is our first movement that's really just focused on the side delt here, that lateral raise, without any kind of front delt involvement, and it's good. Like the lateral raise is a fantastic movement, but again, what I said earlier still applies. Don't raise out to the side, raise out slightly in front of you, and that will just increase the effectiveness of this movement, which is a fantastic movement, just being a dumbbell lateral raise. I'm not really sure what the purpose of the twist here is. I think it is obviously because you're limited for a bit of equipment. It looks quite cool, which it does. But again, I think I'm very much about simple and effective. I think you probably get more benefit from doing less and really ensuring that you are choosing really effective and simple movements. Similar sort of thing as before with the punches. This will very much burn because you're holding the anterior delts under constant tension for a fair period of time. Therefore, you're really going to burn, you're really going to struggle with this. You're not actually really taking the anterior delts to a range of motion. It's obviously going from the hips up here, maybe even higher in some cases. Therefore, the effectiveness of this movement is going to be slightly limited. So there are some good movements in here, 100%, and they're just slight tweaks that may make those good movements even better. But there's also a lot of emphasis on the anterior delts here, which I've already expressed my concerns with all the chest work and other pressing movements you do on other days. I'm sure maybe a bit too much anterior delt work, not enough side delt work. But also another thing is the posterior delts. So the rear delts, the muscle back here, they're yet to have been worked, you see. I haven't seen a single rear delt specific movement, and that is something I would definitely change personally. So the shoulder is obviously split into kind of like 3 primary heads, being front, side, rear. We've spent a lot of time on the front, a little bit of time on the side, but no time on the rear, which is something you typically want to focus on. I think a lot of times people get some anterior shoulder rotation where they start rolling like that, and their shoulder's going to get pulled very far forward, whereas that can be helped when you're doing things like upper back and rear delt work to help bring the shoulders back into a nicer position, thus potentially helping with postural issues you may be having. I'm going to give you my top 3 at home movements for the shoulders. One's going to be for the anterior delt, one's going to be for the side delt, and one's going to be for the rear delt, the posterior delt. The anterior delt is, as I said earlier, it's just a standard dumbbell press. Make sure we're pressing the scapular plane. If we are able to, sat down with back support, but if we're not able to, just being in the most stable and solid position possible. Make sure we're going the whole way down. As we're pressing up, we're coming across slightly, so we're taking the anterior delt from that lengthened position to a shortened position. Fantastic. Don't need to be more complicated than that. Flip around. Okay, let's look at the side delt. What would I do? Again, if we're at home, I would just do a standing dumbbell side raise, as shown by the Ryan Gills video earlier. Stood upright, a slight hinge at the hips so you're leaning slightly forward, reaching your arms as straight as possible and trying to touch the walls to your side, raising in the scapular plane, so about 30 to 45 degrees in front of you. Then flip around, what about the rear delts? And you're going to see a video on screen now. So the video on screen now is me doing a rear delt swing to some extent, because you're essentially swinging the arm. But you could do this without the bench. So what I would do is I'd just stand up and hinge at the hips like you're doing at RDL, for example. And once you get to that bottom position, or maybe let's say 45 degrees or so, do exactly what you're seeing on screen, swinging back. Pinky's up to the sky, you know, the pinky will be the highest point of your hand. You're swinging back at 45 degrees because your rear delt fibers do align at 45 degrees, so you don't want to be going out like this. You want to be swinging back at 45 degrees, as you can see in the video. You can have a slight bend in your elbows, as I do, or you can have your arms as straight as possible. It's really up to you. I just find, for me, I've got a bit of tendonitis, you see. I just found that keeping a slight bend does alleviate some of the tendonitis pain I do get sometimes. And doing a movement like that is fantastic for the rear delts. So there you have 3 fantastic shoulder movements: a press, a side raise, and a rear delt swing. All of them work the intended muscles very effectively, and they can all be done at home. Obviously, you have other variations as well. Those aren't the only 3 movements in the world. You do have things like the front raise and other bits and bobs like that. I'm just saying those are probably my top 3. And I think even just choosing those 3 movements, you can make a really effective home workout with those if you just did a couple of sets of each, as heavy as you can, in the, let's say, 5 to 30 rep range. Probably the higher reps for the isolation movements like the raises and the swings, maybe lower reps for the pressing movement. I think you'd be laughing. Put those 3 together. Again, maybe not as fun, less variation, arguably could be more effective. But that being said, if you want something a bit more fun, a bit more jazzy and exciting, then sure, I think Lilly has some great variations in this workout, and I feel like of all the videos I've seen of hers, this has probably been one of the better ones. And I'm sure my video title will probably be something along the lines of Lilly Sabri's at it again. Not really referring to anything negative. It's more so much the promise of results, which again, as she said, 10-day results. You can't actually guarantee you're going to see results in 10 days. And I do find it hard when people do promise those potentially unrealistic expectations, because you don't know what impact that could have on your audience. Sure, it looks really good for a title, and sure, it may encourage a few more clicks and views, which I do understand, I fully get. But when it promises and maybe contributes to the development of unrealistic expectations, I always do get a bit wary, because some people may get really disheartened by not seeing these results within 10 days. That may negatively contribute to their feelings of worth, their feelings of self, and maybe even their mental health as well, especially when they're kind of almost to some extent promised results within a time period that they may not necessarily see, therefore leading them to believe that they've done something wrong, or that they're part of the problem, or something along those lines, when the reality is 10 days isn't a very long period of time, and in many cases it may well take you longer than 10 days to start seeing results. But I can assure you, if you stick at something, you train hard enough and you train smart enough, you will see results. When? Very much depends, but I can promise you eventually, at some point, be that within 10 days or after 10 days, you will see results. And when you do start seeing results, it makes everything so worth it because you get that kind of reward to the hard work you've been putting in. So when you do have those moments of doubt, which we all do, where you feel like you're not progressing and you've kind of plateaued, you're not going anywhere, stick at it. And if you really want to, see what can change. Could you work a bit harder? Could you work a bit smarter? Do you need to move some exercises around? What's occurring? Just stick at it and the results will come. But they will never come if you stop. That is it. That is a video. We're going to quickly crack on with comment question of the week, and I will make it a quick one because the last video was quite lengthy. I always see people here, including yourself, that in order to keep progressing every week, there should be an increase of weight, reps, or sets. At some point, wouldn't that have its limitations? I.e., you've reached a peak weight, you're doing like 20 sets in one day, you're doing so many reps. I don't really hear people talk about that part, so I'm interested to know your opinion on this. Max did actually answer this quite well, where it basically gets to the point of adaptive resistance where you can no longer progress, and essentially there is a limit. You can only go so far, and when that does occur, we change something. So as Max said, you either do a deload, so you give yourself that extra ability to recover, or you change the movements around. So let's say you've peaked on like let's say a dumbbell shoulder press in the gym, for example, and you can't progress it any further. What can you do instead that works the same muscles? Okay, well, let's move from a dumbbell shoulder press to a machine shoulder press, for example. Similar range of motion, same muscles being used, but a different exercise entirely, thus kind of resetting the adaptive resistance clock, we'll say. When that does happen, and it will happen, make a change. I often do say that to optimize results in a lot of cases, it's usually best to wait until you can no longer progress a movement before changing it, which seems to often fall within like the 5 to 15 week mark. So when that does happen, make a change, swap out the movements, and reset the clock, as it were. That is a bloody fantastic question. Thank you for asking. But yeah, that is it. That is a video. If you decide you like the video, please let me know you like the video by dropping a like on the video. 1,300 likes in the first 24 hours is the goal, so if we reach that, that'd be bloody splendid. If you haven't already, please do consider clicking the red button down below to maybe subscribe to the channel, and maybe even the bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. And if you too have a question you want me to answer at the end of the next video, drop it down below in the comment section for comment question of the week, and I shall do so. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my nasally and croaky voice, and thank you for tolerating the video.